UiPath REFramework is a robust, ready-to-use framework designed for building resilient and scalable RPA projects that uses state machines to handle exceptions, manage retries, flow management, and enable high transaction processing in automation projects. And also it brings best practices that we'll see and use along these tutorials. So this will be a very practical tutorial. So first we'll understand the project, the exercise that we have to automate, and then we'll go into practice and solve it with UiPath REFramework. So here we can see basically a very simple step-by-step. So it consists of automating loan requests submissions. So first we get loan requests from email. So I've created here a folder loan requests that then has 3 folders, and so on the to process folder are the emails to be processed yet. And so the idea is for each loan request email to get the loan data, the loan request data, so loan amount requested, loan term, and so on, and then submit the loan requests on this platform, so here on this form. And after submitting the loan requests, give the feedback, so notify the loan requester about the loan feedback, so the feedback from the platform, so if the loan was approved or not. So that's the idea. So it's a simple project, but that with it we will understand how to work with the UiPath REFramework. And we can see that here we have 2 distinct parts. So we have the part that we get loans to be processed and the part where we process each loan. So processing each loan, it's submit the loan requests on the platform and then notify the loan requester. So with this as a plus on this tutorial, we will apply the dispatcher performer pattern. So it's very used on RPA projects, also with UiPath REFramework, and it consists basically of having the project, the automation project, separated by 2 processes, let's say. So we have the dispatcher, which goal is to get tasks, get transaction data to be processed. So in our case is to get loan requests. And then the performer is the one that will really process, in our case, the loan, which is basically submit the loan request and notify the loan requester. And this approach brings many advantages. One of them is separation of concerns. So we have here clearly separated the part that we get transaction data and the part that we process the data, so the loan requests. And with this, we have also horizontal scaling, because by using UiPath queues, so adding each loan data to a UiPath queue item, then we can have multiple robots running at the same time the performer process. Each one process independently a different loan, and so this brings efficiency, faster time to process all the loans, all the items that we have to process. So it's really good. So let's get started by creating the dispatcher project. So here on UiPath Studio, let's create a new project based on the REFramework. So here, let's define the project name to dispatcher _ loan requests, and let's click on create. So here you can see the high level look, let's say, of the REFramework. So it's composed by 4 state machines. So I'll explain them very briefly. Initialization, the goal here is to initialize all the settings needed in order to be able to run the process, and also initialize applications that are needed to be used. GetTransactionData is to get data tasks to be processed either from a queue item, spreadsheet, database. So that is to get transaction data. Process transaction is to process a transaction. So for example, from a list of tasks, process a task. And then end process, the idea here is to terminate the process execution. So CloseAllApplications used to then finish the execution. Also on the project panel, we can see many folders that come created by default, including workflows that are from the framework, So starting here on the dispatcher, so first we need to get loan requests from Outlook. So on initialization, we don't have to touch on the dispatcher on our case. It's true that we have to use Outlook, but it's everything behind the scenes that will use an activity that will use the APIs for that. So here on the dispatcher, we don't need to touch on anything, but on the performer, we will. So stay here because we will see the initialization on the performer being used. So being the initialization successful, we can see that we have here two different transitions. So if the initialization is successful, we will go to the GetTransactionData state machine. Else, if something fails here, we go to the end process, which means the execution will finish. So everything going well, we'll go to the GetTransactionData, and here is from where we will get, in our case, the emails to be processed, the loan requests. So here, let's open the GetTransactionData workflow here. And so it's from here where we'll get the emails to be processed. So we can see that by default, it's configured to get a queue item from UiPath queue. So this will be the case on the performer, but not on this dispatcher. So we can delete this. And so, well, in our case, to get Outlook emails, so here let's search for Outlook. And so here we will use the activity get email list that allows us to get a list of emails from a dedicated folder. So now it's just adding the needed dependencies. And so now we have to add our connection. So if you don't have a connection added, you just have to click, well, on add new connection and follow the steps that will appear. It's pretty simple. So now email folder. So we want to read from the folder inside of load requests on the folder to process. And so then here we can see the properties panel if we want to only read and read only emails. So let's leave as false just to be easier to test. So let's leave this as false for now. And so as output, we'll get a list of emails. So let's declare here the variable list loan requests emails. Let's save. And so with this, we are getting the list of emails. And so let's just see what we want here to happen. So the first time that we go to the GetTransactionData workflow, the first time we want to get the list of emails. And then for each email, we want to generate a new transaction. So by this way, for each email, we will go, well, we generate a new transaction, which means that we will go throughout the process transaction state machine to go to the process workflow, where in this case, we will add a queue item with the email data. And then after the first email being processed, what we want to happen is to create here a kind of loop. So then we will go again to the GetTransactionData. And on the second time and next times, we don't want to get again a list of emails from Outlook because we got already on the first time. So we want to avoid this duplication. And so only get the next item to process. And do this until there are no more emails to process. And when there are no more emails to process, we go to the node data transition here to finish the execution. So let's start by creating here a condition that will make the process to only get the list of emails on the first time. So here, let's add a if. And so a condition here will be if in transaction number equals 1, we will get the list of emails. So why this will serve the purpose that we want of only getting the list of emails at the first time that we are, well, executing this workflow. Because, well, we can see transaction number is an argument that receives here the value from the transaction number variable, which by default we can see here that has the value 1. However, if we go here to the process transaction at the set transaction status workflow, which is a flow invoked after being executed the process workflow. So the goal here of this workflow basically is to set the transaction status. So for example, if we are processing queue items, we can mark them as failed or successful and also apply some additional logging that might be needed. So here we can see in the end that is incremented the transaction number by 1. So this means that after processing the first loan request, the value of the transaction number will be 2, then 3, 4, and so on. So we can simply use this as a rule here to know. So if we are on the transaction number equals to 1, this means we are the first time here, so get the email list, else we have already the list of emails with us. So if first time get emails. And also we want to keep this list of emails in memory because we will get it one time. We then go out of this workflow to the main and do the rest. And then when we enter again on this workflow, we will not have the list of emails because currently the scope of this variable is only to this workflow. So this means that if we go out, we will lose the list of emails, let's say. So to fix this, let's convert it to an argument of type in out, and then let's save and we go to the main, and here let's refresh arguments on the GetTransactionData invoke, and here now will appear the list, a new argument. Here we can see it. So now let's create a variable that will store what comes from this argument, the list of emails. And very important, now let's increase the scope of this variable to the maximum level possible. So by this way, we'll keep always the list of emails in memory, so we don't miss them. So with that, now let's make the part of generating a transaction for each email. So we create here this loop. So for that, here on GetTransactionData, we will apply another condition. So here, if the transaction number is less or equal to the number of emails that we got from the activity. So if this is true, this means we can use this as a rule to know if there is emails to process yet. And why? Because then we can use an assign activity. And now to get the next email to process, so we can use here list emails. And then here, open parentheses to get a specific email from the list in transaction number less 1. So why less 1? Because the transaction number starts by 1, and on the lists, arrays, and so on, the first item is always on the index 0. So with this, we make sure that we don't miss the first item on the list. And so now we'll assign this to the out transaction item variable, which by default is of type QItem. So let's change that to Office 365 message, which is the type, the email type. So here, let's change Office 365. So Office 365 message. And now we are assigning, so here, get next item. And so this will work because then the transaction number will be always incremented by 1. So then the second time we'll get the item on the index 1, then 2 and 3. And so when the transaction number is bigger than the count, the number of emails, this means that there is no more emails to process. So it's a really nice way to control that. So if there are items to process, get next, that next one. Else, and now we can do this. Else, if there is no more emails to process, what we'll do, we'll assign the allTransaction item to nothing. So what this will call? So if there are no more emails to process, we want to terminate execution. So we set the transaction item to nothing. So with this, we'll go to the transition node data, and this means that we'll go to the end process and finish the execution. So we are controlling that with that. So now with the GetTransactionData in place, so let's just refresh here arguments, because now we will have a problem, which is we changed the transaction item type to Office 365 message, and now we have to do that also here on the main. So we can see it queue items. So now Office 365 message, and now we'll get some errors is normal. So here on the GetTransactionData, we can see that we are getting here this error. We just have basically to cut and paste, and it solves basically. Also here we are getting on this exception block, so cut and paste. So let's do again. Now here on the GetTransactionData workflow invocation, let's pass again the transaction item, because when we change the argument type, it loses here the variable that is passed. So transaction item. And now process transactions. So here we are getting this error because on the process workflow is expected a queue item. So let's change that. And now let's refresh arguments and pass again the transaction item. And now here, set transaction status, it expects a queue item, as we can see here. So here to fix, we can simply use nothing, pass a null here to this argument, and this will work well because we can see here on the set transaction status that there is a validation before marking a queue item as successful or failed if the transaction item variable is not null. So by setting to null, it will not go throughout this activity and will not fail. So we can simply do that. And now let's do that here also on this block. So nothing. And also here on exception, we have to do also. So here, nothing. So let's see how it's working. If you are able to see a transaction per each email being created. So here on the process workflow, I'll just add a write line and toggle a breakpoint. So we can pause here and see, for example, the email content. So now very important, let's run from the main in debug mode. So we pause on the breakpoint. So here we are, first transaction was generated and we are here on the process workflow. So now if we get the transaction item, let's add here something like .body. We can see that we are able to access the body of the first email that we have here. So now let's click on continue, and what will happen will be will be a successful transaction without exceptions. So we'll go again to the GetTransactionData to get a new transaction. So we'll see that happening. So here we can see. So now if we execute again here, we can see now that we are processing a different email with different data. And so, we can see that was basically so that we processed 4 emails. So that's the case here, so it's working pretty well. So now let's set up here the part of extracting the email data to then populate that to a queue item. So here, let's use a multiple assign activity. And first, let's create a dictionary that will store the loan request data. So dic loan request data, and very important with dictionaries, first initialize them. New dictionary of string object. And also here, variable, let's set the type to dictionary of string objects. And now let's create a key on this dictionary for the loan amount requested. And so now to extract the data from the mails, we'll use a regex, regular expressions. So here, let's import the namespace system.text.regular expressions. And now to don't waste much time on this part, I'll just copy here the expressions that I have. You can pause if you want to be able to see better the regular expression. So now for the loan term, so let's create a key loan term and paste, here the expression, then current early income. So here let's get the expression, and again, if you can pause if you want, if it's just to see better the expression. I'm trying to not expend here much time, so focus more on the REFramework part. And then, for the age, requester age. So let's paste here. And also we'll need the email address, is something that is asked on the form. So here also requester email address. And so to get the email address, we can do in transaction item dot sender address. So let's see if it's going well, if we extract the data with success. So here just starting get loan data, and let's run from the main in debug mode. So we pause on the breakpoint and can see the dictionary data easily. So, here we are. So let's call here on the immediate panel for the variable. And so here we can see the data was extracted correctly. So let's jump to the next mail. And here you can see that, this one, I believe, this is other one. And now here, let's call again. So here we can see the data was extracted. So seems it's working pretty well. So after getting the loan data, what we'll do? So we will move the email to the in progress folder. So move email. And so here, email to move is in transaction item to the folder. Here let's add in progress, save. And after that, we'll add a queue item. And so I'm not focusing here on best practices, because if I do, this will be a very long tutorial and will be already. So I might do some parts, but I'm not focusing at all on best practices. So for example, queue item will be great to have it inside of a retry scope, just to give an idea. Also the folder be stored on the config file, which we'll see on the performer at least more about that. So here queue name, so now we have to create a queue, right? So now let's here open the UiPath Orchestrator and create a new queue. So I'll name it loan requests. So like this, for example, and let's add it. So now if we go back, here we can see the queue. So now item information, we can here simply pass the dictionary that we have built. So like this, and basically it's done. Now one important thing is, let's say on the perform we want to move in the end email to the process folder, which makes sense. So to be able to do that, we need to have access to the email as we have here on the dispatcher. So what we'll do, we'll store also the email on the queue item, but probably you already know, or if not, you will know now. Queue items doesn't support all the data types that exist, only the main ones, the most common, like the boolean, string, integer, and a bit more, but I'm not that I might be forgetting, but it's just very few data types that supports. So to be able to store, let's say, the email message with like that we can see that has a Office 365 message type, we'll need to serialize, store it in a kind of string format. So then when on the perform we get it back, we can convert back to the original data type. So here I'll store email message. And so now let's import a Newton soft.json namespace. And here we'll use JSON convert dot serialize object. And here let's pass in transaction item. And that's it. So let's run now. So I'll just remove here the right line and let's see how it's working. So let's run. So it's running. Let's just wait a bit. So all the emails were processed successfully. So now here we can see that all the emails were moved to the in progress folder. So this means that if we run again the dispatcher, for example, no items will be processed because there is no emails on the to process folder. And also the first time it runs successful. So this means that we should see here 4 queue items, which we can see. We could add a reference, but well, no problem. It's not mandatory. And so here you can see the data and also the huge string about the email message, so that it's like on the JSON format. So then we can on the performer get it. So, well, we can see it working well. So that's it for the dispatcher. Now let's take a look to the performer. So on the performer, we want to open this website, the loan application website. So that will be the first step, and then get the queue item, submit the loan request, and notify the loan requester. So now it's time to create another project. So I'll just open other instance of UiPath Studio and create the performer process. And so now we will do something on initialization. So I'm trying to keep this most straightforward possible. Well, so here on InitAllSettings, we'll see something that happens. So which is the loading of the configuration of the settings that are mentioned on the configuration file, which we'll see very briefly, very in a short time. So here InitAllApplications, so here the idea is to init the application's users. So here we can simply use application browser, indicate here this page, and well, in best practice we will then extract this to a workflow, separate, but to keep it more straightforward, let's leave like this. And so here on the properties panel, so one thing that we want to make sure is that we never close the browser at this tab, because we don't want, we want to keep it open. And also open, we want always to open. Now, well, other thing is that we have here the URL, and now we will store URL in the asset of Orchestrator. So let's do that, because so we will see then the configuration file thing that is very worth to know about the REFramework. So here let's store an asset. So it can be a YBank loan form email or loan apply email, loan apply URL, and store here the asset. So now, usually, well, what will happen is that we use the get asset activity, right? And just indicate the asset that we want to get, and then, well, get the value. And we'll have to do this for each asset we want to get. So we want to get 10 assets, 10 get asset activities, for example. But there's a better way. So here, if we go to data, we can see config.xlsx file. If it doesn't appear, make sure you have here the option other selected. And what the goal of this file is to store settings, assets that we want to be loaded and use on the project. So for example, we can see here on these constants sheet that we have here constants about, for example, log messages. For example, here log message get transaction data value process transaction number. So we can understand better, let's search here for this key. And here we can see this key data is being called from the config variable, which is a dictionary. And basically with this, what is happening is that we are getting the value associated with this key. So to see it in a better way, what we'll do here, after the InitAllSettings, let's add a breakpoint. And why after the InitAllSettings? Because it's here where it's loaded the assets, settings, and constants to where? To the configuration dictionary, to the config dictionary. So here we can see initially it's loaded the settings and the constants. And then there is a dedicated part for the assets, so that for each asset will be loaded the asset inside of a loop and assign the asset value to the config dictionary. So let's run in debug so we can see better this working. So I'll just close the Excel file, because if not, we get an error as we got. So let's retry. And now that we are here, for example, we can call config. And here we can see the settings that are loaded. So for example, let's say that we want to get the orchestrator queue name. So we just have to call for the key. And here we got the value associated, so this comes by default. So for example, let's say that we want to load the asset. So what we will do? So here on the file, here, well, let's define a name for the key. So for example, here it can be the same name as the asset or can be different. And then here we have to say the asset name, loan apply URL, let's save, let's close, and now let's execute again. So now if we call here for this key of the config variable, we can see that we got the asset. So the asset value that we were mentioning on the configuration file. So this is very important because it's a really nice way to store, to centralize the settings, constants, and assets that we want to be loaded on, then that we can access from a single variable, which is a dictionary. So now we can, well, remove this breakpoint. And so this is for InitAllSettings, so we don't have to touch on it. So just if we then want to like load custom settings or additional spreadsheets or sheets of the file that we want to add, so we will need to probably change here something, but in our case, we can keep it as it is. Then another thing that is important to mention here is the KillAllProcesses. So basically, this is a workflow. Well, everything that is inside of this block, first run, is only executed in the beginning, a single time, like it says here, if first run. And so we can choose initially to close processes that we don't want to be running. For example, if we use a browser, we want to make sure that before starting the process to close the browser. So with the KillAllProcesses, we can do that. So for example, put here a kill process activity to make sure, for example, that the Edge browser is closed. So just an example. And we could store, for example, this process name on the configuration file. So it's important to keep it in mind. But in this case, well, for now, we'll leave it empty. So going back to the InitAllApplications, so here we are, starting the browser. So here, instead of having the URL hard-coded, let's use the one that is stored on the config variable. We can see that on InitAllApplications, it's passed as argument the config dictionary, which you can access from this argument. So that's it. So here I'll just set maximize window. And so now let's here just add a breakpoint on this checkstop signal and run to see what will happen. So what happens is that we should see being opened, the browser, or as we can see here, was open here on this page. And so now the next step is the GetTransactionData, which we have very few to modify. Better, we don't have to modify at all. So we can see that by default, it gets a queue item from indicated queue folder and queue name. So from a queue name in a specific folder. And then this queue item is sent to the main to then be accessible on the process workflow. So that's done by default. So what we have to change here is here on the config. Let's, here, Orchestrator queue name, put the queue name of our queue. So here, loan requests. And then queue folder, we don't need to specify if we are running, for example, we are running from the same folder. So if it's the case, we don't need to specify, we can leave it empty. So, that's it. So now let's see how it's working. So I'll just put here a breakpoint. Delete the breakpoint. And now here on the process workflow, let's just add a write line, or better, add here a breakpoint so we can see if we are able to retrieve data from the queue item. So let's run from the main. And so here we are. So now we should see something on the in-transaction item. So here we can see data from a queue item that is being currently processed. So if we go here, here on the loan request queue, we can see that we have one item in progress, which is the one that we are seeing right now. So that's it. So when we are here on the process, the process workflow, what we want to do here is to submit the loan request. So here, I'll keep it very simple. I will just here, drag a sequence, submit loan request, and usually we will then extract this as a workflow to separate by workflow, but let's keep it more straightforward. So submit loan requests. And so here we can use application browser and, indicate this page. So let's indicate. And so here we can, I'll just here, unlink this object repo thing. So here we don't need to pass the URL because also we don't need to open here the browser because it will be already open. And now let's set the close to never. So make sure the browser will not be closed at this step on the process. So then we can use, well, type into for the email address, then another type into for the loan amount requested, then a select item for the loan term because it's a, well, it's a drop down, so let's do that. Then we can use a type into for the current early income. And in fact, we could try to use the fill form activity. Now I'm looking to it that does, well, the semantic thing of understanding the form, the data that we pass to put on the form and fill accordingly. But well, now let's move ahead with the type ins. So now for the age, and then click. So we want to do a click to, well, submit. So now, well, we need to pass the data. So to get it, so transaction item dot specific content to get the specific data from the queue item. And so here, well, for email address, the key is requester email address. So here, let's pass that dot to string. Now let's copy this and paste here. So loan amount requested, it's loan amount requested. So here, loan amount requested. Then here, loan terms. So let's pass here. Well, I just pause a bit because I'm having here guys a bit, I'm needing a bit of rest. I'll come soon. Well, I'm back. So now here, loan terms. So let's pass out in transaction item dot specific content. And so here for this one will be loan term. So here, let's put then current early income. So current early income. So let's here add. Then, well, for the age, it's requester age, if I'm not wrong, and I'm not. So that's it. So then we could add here logs will be ideal, but let's keep it straightforward. So then we do the click. And so after doing the click, so let's just simulate this. So for example, add here an email and here age. So loan approved. So here we have the case of the loan approved. So now, well, what we'll do here is add another sequence, validate loan status. And so for this, we'll use a pick activity that will have two branches, one for loan approved and another for loan not approved. So here first, let's add, well, a check app state that will, well, understand, we'll see when the loan is approved. So here we can, for example, select this element, for example, just as an example, confirm. So here, I will just keep as it is, just to be more straightforward. So then here, now let's get, well, the case when the loan is not approved. So to generate it very easily, let's just put here a case where the age is below 18. So that will make it to be not approved. So, well, here we have it. So now let's indicate here this label, for example. And that's it. So with this, we can now use an assign activity. And of course, it will be better to rename here because it has just the default names. But as I said, I'm trying to keep it more straightforward, just focus more on the REFramework thing. So here, bool low and approved. So let's create this variable And let's increase the scope to the process level, to the whole workflow. And here let's set it to true. Also thing variable type to boolean. And so else, if this appears, false. And then, of course, we could, for example, in the case loan approval, extract the data from the loan to send it to the loan requester. But let's keep it simple. So then let's reply to the email to the loan requester. So let's use this activity, reply to email. And so email to reply. So we can now get the email that we stored in JSON format that we can see here. So how we can do that? So here on Studio. So for that we can use here, for example, even on the same activity here, we can do a direct cast and then pass here in transaction item dot specific content email message, which is the key that has, well, the JSON string, and then here indicate the type, so it's Office 365 message. And by this way we are converting the JSON string to Office 365 variable type message. So now we are getting, well, this error. Better. Let's store this on a variable first. So here, Office email message, for example. Just keep it simple, really. And then here, let's convert email message variable to Office 365 message. So then we can pass like this. But we are getting this error, so this is something about the reference required to assemble. Well, let's use the autopilot here. So let's get suggestions. Let's see if it fixes the error. So it's autopilot. In the moment that I'm recording this, it's pretty recent. So let's just here wait a few seconds. You can see it's here below. And then pass here the email message. And then we just had to pass, well, the body. So then here, save as draft, that's set to false, so to really send the email. And now that I'm thinking, because I didn't quite plan this last part, so here on the validated loan status, let's instead to delete here this boolean and just create the str email body, email answer body, because in this case makes more sense. It's so here we can just set to string, and so the loan was approved. Else here the loan was not approved. And so then here we just need to pass here the variable that has the answer to send. And that's basically it. So then in the end, let's also move the email to the process folder. So here, email to move is email message and folder. So here, let's indicate the folder. So it's reloading. So here, loan requests process, save. And that's it. So before executing, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that after submitting a loan request, so I'm just here putting the tab. So we have to go back to this page. So we are always, when we go again process a new transaction, we are here on this page. So we have everything ready to fill the information and submit the form. So to do this, to handle this properly, so be always on this page. Here on this case, we can simply here in the beginning use use application browser, indicate here, and then here let's just I will unlink here the from the object repository. So here delete this URL, close never, not open never, because it will be already open. And here let's add a go to URL, so to navigate always to the page where appears the form. So we are always sure when we start processing a transaction, we'll be on the page where appears the form to submit the loan request. So here we just have to pass this key that has the URL. And that's basically it. So let's see how it's working. So let's run. So let's here execute. So we have 4 emails to be processed. So first one is being processed. So let's just remove this breakpoint. And so now, it's doing the job, let's say. So we can see here. So now we are here and we got here an exception. So probably it was a typo. So it says email address. Well, yeah, that's true. It doesn't exist at all. So that was a small mistake from my side. So here, if we go to the orchestrator, we can see, that the key is not email address, but is email message. So that's a difference. So here, let's just, that was a small mistake from my side. So email message, let's run again. So currently is running. So it's filling the loan data. It was submitted. However, we are getting here an error, unable to cast object of type system string to this typo. That's bad. I didn't plan this part. I was hoping that this would work. So let's try other thing instead. So here, let's use other approach. So let's call here, imports newtonsoft.json, and now here let's newtonsoft.json, or JSON, we don't need to do that, with JSON convert dot serialize the serialized object of Office 365 message. And now here, let's pass the text, the JSON string, email message dot to string. That's I'm not sure if it will work, but nothing to lose, right? So let's just move one email to the to process folder so we can run the dispatcher process, because currently there are no queue items to process. So let's run the dispatcher, and now we have a queue item. So now let's run again this main on the performer. So it's currently running. Now we got an error here. The resource could not be found. At least we were able to parse, right? Yeah, we were able to parse. So what's the no resource could not be found? Did a bit of research and I think I found the reason for the error. So here on the dispatcher, one thing that I forgot was here on the move email. We can see that we get as output an email. And so basically To the queue item, we are passing the email when it is on the toProcess folder, and behind the scenes, when we are moving to other folder, the reference used for the email, such as probably the message ID, must change, and that's why we are getting the error. So here on the dispatcher, just a small change. So here, let's add an assign of the email. And so here, let's copy this and delete, paste here, and now let's here the output of the move mail in transaction item. So we overwrite the value, the email on the in transaction item variable for the one that comes from the move email. So I believe this fixes the problem. So now if we go to Orchestrator, and let's make sure we delete any in progress better new item. So let's here, well, if we have something new, so let's delete it, remove. So now let's execute again the dispatcher. So it will run. So, well, nothing added to the queue because the emails aren't. Well, nothing added to the queue because the mails are on the in progress folder. So let's move them to the toProcess and execute again. Now it worked well, so let's execute again now the performer. So let's run it from the main. So here it is, so it's currently working. So loan was approved. And now it's processing the second transaction. So we can see that was basically moved to the next transaction. However, it didn't navigate. So let's just stop and see at least if it sent the email. So here we can see on sent items that was basically sent the email that the loan was approved. So it's working well now. So now to fix here the navigation issue that we got, that it got stuck. Here we have to change the selector. So here we can see that is looking, so the tab title changes. So let's make it dynamic. So here wildcard, and if we're using here reference, so the input output element from the user application browser, we will not have to worry here with this part, but that will take just some more time to set up. So now also on initialization, let's configure the closing of the browser. So to kill the process. So ideally, we will store the process to kill on the configuration file and then loop throughout each process name and use a kill process. But let's keep it straightforward. So let's just here add MS and of course we could store this as I was saying on the configuration file, but then we have to create the argument and so on. So let's try to keep it straightforward. So now here we have the KillAllProcesses. So when we execute the process, the browser will be closed, the Chrome, the Edge browser. Now also on the end process, let's set up the closing. So on the CloseAllApplications workflow, let's add the use application browser. And now here to it, let's indicate, for example, this page. And now let's just remove the URL. And here, close to always, open to never. So close is very important to be always to make sure the browser will be closed. And then here the selector, let's add here the wildcard because the tab name changes the title depending on the step. So let's add that. And now let's see how it works. So we have yet two queue items to process, if I'm not wrong. Yes, that's the case. So let's run and see how it works. So it will close the browser, as we'll see. So it was closed. So now we can see it's working. So it will submit a loan application, was approved. And now we will see that now was done the navigation successfully and it's processing the second loan request. And now it should finish and close the browser because there was no more queue items to process, which means that we go throughout the no data transition and then end the process by closing the browser. So if we take a look here on Outlook, we can see that was sent other 2 emails with the message the loan was approved, which was the case because all of them were approved. And that's it for this tutorial. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up. And now subscribe to the channel and enable notifications bell so you don't miss any tutorial released here on the channel. And if you want to dive deeper into UiPath REFramework, I have a 4-hour course where we'll learn everything about the framework in detail with hands-on exercises and challenges included so you can put in practice what you learn along the course. And get special discount by enrolling throughout the link in the tutorial description.